Meet Mbeuta Wanjarakana, Executive Director of Namibia's Ministry of Information, a high-ranking government official tasked with communicating the ruling SWAPO party's government policies. He is a descendant of the genocide, which claimed 80% of the Ovaherero population and 60% of the Nama population. This month, Wanjarakana resigned from the governing SWAPO party in protest over its handling of the genocide deal.
Before my resignation, I went out public through media to say I disagree with the deal as brought by government. It's not the deal that we would appreciate because it does not speak to admission of guilt by the Germans for having committed genocide on our forebearers. It does not speak to reparations. It speaks to project funding. Our struggle is for reparations and restorative justice. This does not come a shadow nearer to what our justified demands are.
After over 2 decades of negotiations with the Namibian government, Germany finally committed to a 1.3 billion in financial aid spreading over a 30-year period, with the funds set to go to development projects.
We didn't lose money, so money should not really be a preoccupation of our concern. We lost land, we lost our livestock, we lost our culture.
But is it Germany's fault that the deal is bad when Namibia was well represented?
Government was not supposed to appoint representatives. Affected communities were supposed to field their representatives. In fact, the motion, 2006 motion, says the affected communities should face the Germans. The Namibian government should be an interested party accompanying its citizens who are descendants of the victims to engage the German government. So how the government accept that role from the communities and ran away, that was the negotiation in bad faith. Because government is not the rightful claimant to reparations, to restorative justice. It is the affected communities.
The so-called legitimate representatives of the Ovaherero and Nama have effectively dumped the deal. They are disowning key elements in the deal. They are disputing the quantum. They are demanding 8 trillion euro as opposed to the 1.1 billion euro offered by the Germans. They are saying they have never seen these proposals for this quantum. They are disowning other key elements. It just tells you and confirms to you that both the Namibian and German government were negotiating on our behalf in bad faith. This is not what they have negotiated. So it's a baby born dead. We were grossly misrepresented by the Namibian government. The money doesn't even take off. The money probably amounts to the daily installment which they should pay for the next 200 years.
Germany took control of Namibia, then Southwest Africa, in 1884 until it lost the colony in 1815 during World War I. German settlers brutally repressed uprisings against their rule, killing thousands of Herero and Nama people. Luther von Trotha, a German general sent by Berlin to put down the rebellion, ordered the Ovaherero and Nama people's extermination. His soldiers drove people into exile and rounded up men, women, and children, placing them in concentration camps. Many of the victims were used as slave labor in the camps, where thousands died from exhaustion, starvation, and disease.
As long as this deal does not refer or fails to refer or to recognize our identities of Ovaherero and Nama people and rather talks about affected communities quite conveniently, so we reject it because our identity cannot be disowned. We were killed, specifically targeted and killed as Ovaherero and Namas, acting on the instructions of the then colonial Germany. This deal is a baby born dead.
Addressing the Namibian parliament this week amidst the genocide deal protests, Namibia's Minister of Defense, Frans Kapofi, said Germany's acceptance of responsibility for the first time in over a century is an achievement of some measure and a primary step in the process of seeking restorative justice for the affected communities. But for Sam Kawapirura, special advisor to the Ovaherero paramount chief, this deal is fictitious.
This deal doesn't even mention our loss of land. We permanently lost pretty much 70–80% of our land. This business of trying to enforce a fictitious type of reconciliation, which is dressed in a flagrant denial of our rights as a direct victims of the genocide, of the first genocide of the 21st century, can simply not succeed. Germany cannot deny our genocide, yet offer apology for it. Even if she apologizes, Germany remains morally and legally liable to pay reparations, which they have rejected to pay. They're talking about reconstruction and reconciliation. They're talking about assistance and projects. Those things are not synonymous to the legal concept of repairing the wrong you have done. So in the absence of restorative justice, we cannot even begin to fathom the whole notion of reconciliation. Talking about land, the absence of a solid admission by the Germans in the agreement and our government's complicity in this regard, that we have permanently lost land, is actually criminal, if you ask me. And the loss of that land continues to perpetuate poverty among our communities, hardship and suffering, as a result of the forcible removal from our land by the Germans. Land should, as far as we are concerned, constitute the basis for any talks with Germany regarding our genocide. So we reject this agreement that also rejects the loss of our land.
We have instruments such as the United Nations. We have instruments such as the International Court of Justice, because it's justice that is being denied or delayed our affected communities, and we will have to prosecute those avenues.
And Kawapirura challenges the world to compare Germany's different approach in the Jewish genocide deal.
They've negotiated with the Jews for something like 6 months. They started paying them a lot of money. They even paid money to individuals in their own pockets. They paid 23 Jewish organizations, and then they paid for the creation of the Jewish state. They upped the money from something like 200 billion euro to something like, 500 billion euro. And they continue paying them. So there's no similarities. With us, they call it reconstruction. It's offered on their terms. They offered it to government. They couldn't care about the affected communities. They dictate the terms of the apology and this thing. So it actually suggests racial discrimination simply because we are black.